Okay, welcome everyone to Artivism, the Power of Art for Social Transformation. Thank you to Sing for Hope, Gottesman Libraries Teachers College at Columbia University and Adelphi University for being our sponsors. Thank you to Dr. Stephanie Lake for housing us in her criminal justice department. And thank you to Carolina for bringing all this to us and to me. So today we have Melissa Leaym-Fernandez, who will be presenting. Her student ambassador is, hold on, Yue Leo Wang, a native of Shijaz Wang. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Shijazhuang, well, close enough.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Leo now resides and works from Chicago, Illinois. Presently, he is pursuing his concurrent graduate degree in fine arts from the School of Art Institute of Chicago. As a multimedia artist, fashion model, and aspiring architect, polymath. Leo is the proud recipient of several merit awards and has been showcased in 3 solo exhibitions. #SoFab, #SoFab, Flamboyant Only, and maybe you could put those in the chat. Put them in the chat so we can share them if you'd like. And SoFab Faux Venus. Leo addresses key phenomena in today's social media and pop youth culture by paying attention to issues such as clubbing culture, body image, gender stereotypes, and the power dynamic in sexual interplay. With boutique elements, bright colors, and artificial materials, he projects fabulousity and confidence by filtering them through an ideal persona. For his work and personality, Leo has been featured in several publications, most notably Valley Magazine, The Daily Collegian, and Center Daily Times. You can also see Leo's work at www.madebyleowang.com and on his Instagram at madebyleowang. Okay, Leo, take it away.
All right. I'm like, hey, everyone. Wait, yeah, perfect. Yeah, it's such an honor for me to introduce Melissa Leaym-Fernandez. Like, I know Melissa for so long. Like, her work has been always amazing. So Melissa Leaym-Fernandez was born into poverty and at a very young age found that society considered her body disposable. As a survivor and now thrivor in life, she overcame much of the childhood trauma she endured as a multiracial girl in the United States. Art and making was her secret superpowers. Making has become her strength, be it sewing with the women in her family, drawing tucked in a quiet space, and or learning new skills that strengthen her artistic practice as a professional artist, such as welding or cutting stained glass works. Understanding how to overcome and manage the outcomes of trauma and strength throughout art making has always been part of her professional practice. Her professional artworks make connections between the role of women, specifically single parenthood, wife, motherhood, and daughterhood, while entangling connections to live experiences of elephants in the wild. Connections of including roles of the matriarch and the aunties that nurture, protect, lead, assist with birth and mourn with death and raise offspring with various family and hers. Her work is in personal and corporate collections, and she has shown in museums, corporate and gallery spaces. You can see her work at www.elephantworkstudio.com. As a community and teaching artist and social activist, she has worked in often challenging and violent locations, including an alternative education program in Flint, Michigan during the height of the ongoing water crisis and with the leprosy affected in India. Knowing firsthand the outcomes of adverse childhood experiences or ACEs, she had worked passionately to help others as an art educator. Told to never go to college repeatedly by her hate-filled 6th grade teacher, she resisted again and again and has completed many degrees. She had held a certificate in depth studies. She holds a BFA in painting and a Bachelor of Science in Art Education with her teacher certificate. She holds a Master in Art Education and another in Art Administration. She also owns and operates the elephantworkstudio.com. Her artwork has been shown in museums, galleries, and corporate spaces in various states and countries, and she has taught in royal, urban, public, and private settings globally. She will complete her doctoral degree at Penn State University, summer 2022 in art education, with a certified minor in women's, gender, and sexuality studies. Her research delves into the creative process of women of color artists who have childhood trauma to assist educators in better understanding how to facilitate growth and healing at earlier age through creative meaning with peoples. Additionally, she studied gender representations and modernists in East and South Asian television, movies, and music media, critically watching over 147 Korean, Chinese, Thai, and Indian TV series and movies to date. Now, let's welcome Ms. Leaym-Fernandez.
Thank you, Leo, for that introduction. And I just have to say that I love today, not that only it's Monday, but that it's Valentine's Day. And I love Valentine's Day because it kind of gives us a reason and excuse to share our love with those we appreciate and to give gratitude. And I am really thankful to ARTIVISM and the team for inviting me to come and speak today. And I'm just grateful for that. So thank you. Years ago, I read a book and it's called The Simple Act of Gratitude, How Learning to Say Thank You Changed My Life. And it's by the author, John Kralik. And throughout my talk today, I'm going to offer some different titles to you. And if you want those at the end, I can put them in the chat. But I think it's really a good thing to do is to grab a book and to slow our brains down and to slow our life down in a slow fashion way by stepping away from our electronics to learn. But back to the theme of gratitude in this book. So the author, if I remember correctly, was going through a pretty horrific time in his life. He was going through a divorce and he was a lawyer, I believe, and was ending a practice with a partner and then starting a new one from scratch. So not in a good place. And he decided to do an experiment to vent his anger and his frustration and his sadness. And he decided to write a gratitude letter or a thank you note every day for 1 year. Now, as I read this book and followed and learned about his experiments and, the encouragement of my mother to always say thank you to people, I decided to take opportunities to enact what this author had done, to find people to say thank you to. And I actually found it very edifying to do so, but I also selectively, and I say that cautiously, selectively thank those that actually had done me harm. And this is what I wrote in my dissertation introduction to those who did harm to me. I said, finally, I also wish to thank all the incredibly long list of horrid people who had wafted in and out of my life. For without your abuse, neglect, attacks, hate-filled words, violent assaults against my body, and repeated attempts to erase not only my life, but my artworks and words, I would not have the fire in my soul to be the creative, resistant woman I am today. And I felt it was really important to thank these people, though I don't have anything to do with any of them. I thought it was important to have kind of this selective moment of thanking them because in essence, some of those experiences have helped define who I am. I tried to test Kralik's outcomes. And so off and on, I have over a year or so, and even today, I found myself thinking about those people that do service for me and thanking them. And they're kind of the people that we erase in society, the attendant in the bathroom, and thanking that person for keeping the restroom clean for me and making it an individual experience. I thanked the bus drivers and servers in restaurants and teachers. With my students, I thanked those who had funded grants that I had written for supplies while I taught in Flint. I thanked family members. I thanked neighbors and coworkers and even some strangers for their acts of kindness. And I used my art making as a gift to create, or just, I would make things and give those away as thank yous. And also I would make often elaborate thank you cards or notes to give away. One of the things that I did with my class and that I've done on my own is we would color a watercolor sheet of paper and I'd let the kids just do whatever they wanted. And we'd write a love note on the back of it and thanking those that had supported us. And then we would cut it out into puzzle pieces and then put it in an envelope and send it off to whoever we were saying thank you to. And I have to say, I've never been thanked so much for thank you cards as I have when I taught. And I wonder, has anyone ever been, thanked for a thank you card? But that was really quite a fun experience. one organization that, while teaching in Flint, had provided some supply grants to us and giving really some wonderful supplies, was particularly energetic in thanking us for our thank you cards and very appreciative. And one thing that's really interesting about saying thank you is that people remember you when you take the time to show gratitude. And before I came to Penn State to start my doctorate, I lived near and taught in Flint, Michigan. And the district that I taught for was about $14 million in debt. And they did not have resources at all. There was nothing. I was given $200 to run a middle school and high school art program. And during this time, I really didn't like the fact that I couldn't do what I wanted to do with these kids. When I went in for the interview, I was given two choices. I could go to the best school or the worst school. And I chose to go to the worst school with my eyes open. I thought, well, maybe these kids have never even had art. Maybe they don't even know anything about art. And then I kind of chastised myself and thought, well, who am I to make that assessment about their lives? They could have all had art. But I was right in assuming that they hadn't. And I found that not only did they need me, but I needed them. And through these experiences, they taught me the power of sharing my own lived experiences. And I found that if I could survive, and if I could thrive after all that I had gone through, that I had a responsibility to share that with them. Because many of them believed that what their days were like would be their entire life. And I found that I had a responsibility to share not only my lived experiences, but my testimony that it could be done, that one could break out of poverty, that one could learn new skills, that one could reject societal imposed labels that degrade and devalue. Now, these were children and young adults who were self-described losers, dropouts. They were parents, they were parentless. They were called idiots and troubled, and most of them had been kicked out of either home or schools at some point in their life. They were hurting, and many were dealing constantly with food and fiscal insecurities, all alone without any support. Many were dumped off in this program that I taught in with scant resources, with learning, social, and behavior challenges. They were angry, they were emotionally exhausted, and leery of change. But I saw myself in them, and thus my journey continued as I taught students about gratitude and asset-based thinking, to find not only their strengths and develop them, but to give them encouragement and love and respect to help them become who they could become. For years and years, these kids were drilled over and over about what they were not, to the point where they started to believe the lies about themselves as truth. But to me, I saw something very different. Through the anger and the heartache, I saw resistant, savvy, talented, alternative learners who were street smart and often highly sophisticated thinkers. Yes, many read at a third grade level, but this fact alone should not define who they would be as vibrant children and young adults, or who they could become. In this violent setting, we decided to learn together. As an example of violence, of what we had to deal with in this school and program, 3 times in 1 year, we were pepper sprayed by the police liaison in our building. So I just want to say to everyone that's here today, you are not having a bad day unless you've been pepper sprayed, because that was our reality of the things that could happen anytime, the danger that we were in at any time. And so one thing I decided to do when looking at these students and dealing with them was to change and shift my thinking to an asset-based thinking, which required me to look at the good points in them and their strengths. especially when in a society we are taught to look at people's defects and to seek things that will allow us to separate or force us to separate. This asset-based thinking was something that was new to them. It wasn't really new to me, but it was new to them. And it was something that I taught them about. And it was really quite amazing. I found too that my students were very uncomfortable about sharing thanks, and that they did so with this very strong air of uncomfortability. But for every grant that we received supplies for or funding for, I explained to them the value of saying thank you and how it would make those that had donated their cash from their hard-earned labors to our program when we acknowledge that sacrifice. And even though those people that donated, we may perceive to have more than we, the students, like these were rich people, right, that are giving money for supplies, like it just blew their minds. But to say thank you and to know the power of that was something that was very profound with many of them. One day a student came to me and he asked, why do we have to study Van Gogh? And I said, we don't. Who do you want to learn about? And he said, well, I'd like to learn about some Black painters. And I said, okay. And so this asset-based thinking not only allowed me to change my professional practice as I'm looking at my students and looking at their strengths, it allowed me to really grab onto the reality that I have control over my teaching practice. And for some reason, as a student who was kind of a product of the discipline-based art education, that theory of thinking, I never really believed that I could. I thought, this is what I've taught, this is what I have to teach. And I knew the dead white men of Western civilization with a smattering of white Western women, and that was pretty much it. I was just starting to really kind of raise my own consciousness about artists of color. And so I decided that I was going to do something different, because not only did the lack of my own culture in what I was teaching anger and frustrate me, I found it really boring to just study the same people over and over again. And if you would like to learn more about how we are taught and acculturized to focus on Western culture in our arts practice, I suggest that you read the Paulgrave Handbook of Race and the Arts in Education, which is a wonderful resource that teaches about how racism is impacted arts education. But I digress. So the conversation about Van Gogh was pretty powerful to me for a couple of reasons. One, like I mentioned, I really started to believe that I could do whatever I wanted in my classroom. I really grabbed onto that belief. And I kind of remember the moment when I really let that sink into my head and I believed it. The second thing that was really kind of exciting is that I really started to take utter control of my feminist practice of including my students in their own learning in profound new ways. I couldn't really find all the assets and asset thinking without listening to their voices. So this is one thing that we did, and I would invite everyone to do that. So if we pause for a second, and if you have a piece of scrap paper by you or a Post-it, this is what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to write down on a piece of paper, I give myself permission to be artistic and or creative. Now, as you write down, I give myself permission, there are some really cool things that come with that. Sign it, date it, and stick it on your mirror in the bathroom or above your kitchen sink or on your fridge, someplace where you'll see it all the time. Because now, once you've given yourself permission, there are some things that you're going to let go of in your creative practice. First, you're going to kind of remove this, I can't do it. And so we get that with our younger students, right? I can't do it. It's hard. Little tiny people. I really can't do it. Don't make me. They're so cute. But sometimes we get that with college age kids too, right? Sometimes we get that with older adults. I can't. It's hard. Well, I just want you to think about when you were tying your shoe for the first time, or making your bed, or trying to put on clothes, or texting for the very first time. My mother has what we call a dumb phone, and she's in her 80s, so she's allowed to have a dumb phone because she doesn't really like to be on a cell phone. But when she texts, it's like 3 clicks, right, to get to the letter C. Remember when we all tried that, and we had like elephant thumbs. They were so slow and we couldn't get them to do. And now it's like people can text really quick. They can throw on their clothes really quick. They can tie their shoes really quick. But sometimes people, when they're being creative, think that they should be able to sit down and do something creative and amazing in 5 minutes, not really understanding or acknowledging that skill development takes time. And when we start these new skills, sometimes we're just awful. I mean, I know when I was texting for the first time, people would laugh at me because I was so slow and meticulous. And I was just awful at it. And I remember as a child trying to tie my shoes and make the bow and hold the bow in place and then tie it around. I would get so angry because it wouldn't do what I thought it should do, that little lace. And so we have to kind of own it when we're being creative. We have to give ourselves permission and own the failure that will come with that permission. And we have to be kindness-filled towards ourselves and others as we go through those episodes of failure. The failure will allow us to grasp learning and the success that we will have. I remember years ago, I took a college level welding class, and some of these guys and girls could just like weld these straight little smooth beads of welding. It was just awesome to look at. And I would get really frustrated. And my instructor said to me, you know, you just need to practice a little bit more and lighten up. And I thought, yep. I then took my own advice and I gave myself permission to fail. And I gave myself the power to try again in a more relaxed manner. And finally, permission makes you acknowledge that you are a student and learning and not necessarily a professional. Often teachers and parents and ourselves add pressure to the learning processes, and this pressure follows us around into our adulthood as we learn new things. And so for me, artistic is what a student or a new learner is. Artistic with a lowercase a. I did math as a child, but no one called me a mathematician. I did science and I wrote, but no one called me a scientist or writer. And I found too that the only ones that really push back about this definition that I hold are pressure adding parents of princes and princesses. And so I find it really interesting that if we just let ourselves be creative and enjoy those learning moments, it's just fine. It's just fine to fall down and get dirty as we learn. I use the term artist with a capital A to describe that person with skills out of the formal learning setting or phase in their life, someone who's no longer a student and who could still be artistic because the student is artistic and still learning those skills. The artist is probably the one, for the most part, that's supporting self and family with their practice. The artist is professional in its varying degrees, and the artist has something to say. And the great ones advocate for social justice. So I'd like you to take a moment and think about who is artistic and who is artist in your life. And these roles are very different, of course. These definitions are very different, but they're very powerful in their own right. So then I want to ask, what do you do creatively in your life? What really excites you? How much time do you make for being creative daily? Do you make with others or alone? Are you stuck and you just don't know what to do? You want to be creative, but you can't get any ideas and you don't know what to use? If this is the case, you're more than welcome to jump onto my website. And if you go over to the little hamburger at the top or it says more, there's actually a page that's Creative Healing Helps. And I have tons of ideas on that page of what you can do to be creative in your own space or with others. I thought about doing an activity today, and interestingly enough, I decided not to. And I decided not to for a couple of reasons. I find that when people have to do the work on their own and raise their own consciousness, that they value their learning more significantly. And I find that they are thankful for the new knowledge that they have. Instead, I want to share a recent path that I took in learning something new. So in our family, we love books. We have over 10,000 books in our house in Michigan, and we just love books. And I can tell you when the power goes out, we're all very happy because we have something to do. But recently I bought this book, and it's called Mending Matters. And it's a slow fashion guide for the well-loved wardrobe by Katrina Rodabaugh. And she teaches methods of sashiko. Sorry, I juxtaposed letters there, of sashiko. And sashiko is a clothing repair method that's Japanese, and it's very traditional, and it's a very ancient practice. And so I bought this book because one, it's a beautiful book, and it's beautifully illustrated with great photos, and it's an art piece in itself. And the other reason I bought it is I wanted to learn something new, a new method on how to repair my jeans. And so my jeans needed repairs because my thighs actually touch at the top, and the legs part wore out. And my pants wore out because this year I decided to not buy any new clothes. I wore them out because I'm wearing them much more often. And I'm blogging about this experience on my website. I decided not to buy new clothes after delving into the impacts of fast fashion and global environments and lives. I learned about fast fashion through my own research on gender representations in South and East Asian television and movies that I critically examine and charactered fashion through costuming. Another big thank you to Leo, because I was on a search for a designer and he helped me find it, and it was Tom Brown. So thank you, Leo. And I also learned about fast fashion through a class that I'm teaching at Penn State called Diversity, Pedagogy, and Visual Culture, where I taught about the history of jeans. And this one interest of jeans, then to fashion, then to finding some repair method, led me on this great path of discovery. Were the jeans that I patched up perfect? No, but I like the process. And it's something that I'll do I'll make more repairs and other embellishments to clothing that I have. But I learned this new skill on my own. I did it at my own pace and in my own space and with my own time. And it's something that I value. With my dissertation research, I'm learning what women of color artists must have to be satisfied as they make art. My participants have all have what are called ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, which are specific types of trauma. And the data is showing that people need specific elements in their lives to not only overcome the outcomes of trauma, but to thrive as artists. They need control in their lives, and this power shines in their creative processes as well as life. They need connections to nature and the outdoors, however big or small. They need connections to music in their lives, and they need to feel safe. They need to be making with their chosen media, and this making is a part of their identity, not a separate element, but tied tightly to who they are as human beings. They show gratitude through their art making and talents. And so today, I want to suggest to you some implementations of these elements in a new creative practice. I'm going to challenge you to learn something new. So the first thing is practice until you have control of that medium, and practice with your time to set that time aside so that you can develop that skill. After you learn this new skill or make time to refresh with a skill that's an old friend, I want you to think, and I want you to come up with ways that you can use that skill to show gratitude to others. I also would like you to thank the person that taught you. And that may be challenging if you learned a skill long ago, but I would like you to find that person that taught you this new skill or helped you to get the resources to learn your new skill. So maybe it was a clerk at a bookstore who helped you find a book, or maybe it was a professor or a high school teacher from years ago. And then I'd like to challenge you to make something, an artwork or some kind of product, and then give it to that person or to a different person as an act of gratitude. And doing this will help you to expand your community and strengthen your community. And so when you think of what is your community, you really could define that any way you want. It could be school and co-students there and professors or staff members. It could be coworkers. It could be the living areas in which you live within an apartment or your neighborhood. It could be members at a religious group or social setting. And we could really expand our communities to include whoever we want. So I wanted to think, how could you expand this learning of this new skill to include or benefit your community? Would you be willing to teach what you've learned to one or two people? Would you be willing to start your own community group near your home or at work? Could you reach out to local governments and entities or arts organizations, post on community boards to see if anyone's interested in learning what you have to teach? So these are some challenges, because this last year in COVID, or last 2 years that we've been in COVID, the themes that I've really heard a lot about are self-care and self-nurturing. And it's really been about this introspective look at ourselves. But in the processes of doing that, I think some of us have become selfish and we've stepped beyond self-care. And I think it's time for us now as human beings to start to be selfless and to expand our care and our nurturing that we've given so diligently to ourselves to our communities. And this can be done in baby steps. It doesn't have to be go to Wembley Stadium and teach thousands, right? I mean, we don't have to overthink it. We can find one person and share our talent with. And we can do this in a very casual, comfortable way. So don't overthink it when you're thinking of being selfless with your creativity in your community. You know, here are some ideas that may be old. You may know these ideas, or they may be something new, but I wanted to share some of my favorite things. So I really like to work with ink and twig. So you may be saying, what is ink and twig? So ink, like India ink of any kind that you like, or any kind of colored ink. And what I do is I love to go out to a deciduous tree, which is a tree that sheds its leaves, right? And get a branch off that tree, the comfortable thickness of a pencil or a pen, and clean it up and let it dry for like a week. And you stick it in the pencil sharpener and you give it a nice point, and then you can draw and write with it. And it's amazing because trees have great layers. They have the core of fiber. Then they have this wicking area, which is where the liquid nutrients goes up and down and all around in the tree. And then they have the bark. So they're naturally made to hold ink. And it's really a fun, natural tool to use as you work with ink and twig. The other thing too is that's actually kind of a reinforcement of what I found in my research, that nature is part of that connection. I'd love to just draw shapes with a pen or a pencil and then color them in later. Watercolor, colored pencil. I like weaving with various yarns and random fabrics and fibers. Cut metals and foils to emboss paper, and transparent papers on glass. Just some random fun things that I like to work with. And as a note, when you're finished with this piece, maybe writing on the side of it or behind it or on the back, the date and the time and why it was significant to you, like what was going on in your brain when you were making this piece, and journaling about it and keeping track of that making. And some other ideas that could impact your life and community as you make items to give away could be fine arts, right? Painting, ceramics, fiber, design, making of all kinds, cooking for some instant gratification, right? You get to cook and then you get to eat, crafting. And again, I would really recommend you read the Paulgrave Handbook that I mentioned, because I love to blur the lines between fine art and craft. Some of the best artists I love are considered crafters, and yet their work is just sublime and beautiful. Writing and illustrating your own work. Something that's really fun to do that I really enjoy are haiku poems, and then simply illustrating them. Book repurposing, welding, growing succulents or bonsai, journaling, and then adding illustrations. And then just so many more creative things that we can do. I mean, the list is really unlimited. In all of these activities that you use to do for yourself, you can share with others as you build your community. We may not all be artists with a capital A, but we all can be artistic. And we can start to look at ourselves and others with asset-based thinking to improve the human condition, if only at the micro level in the beginning, because we all have to start someplace. And today I want to leave you with 4 challenges of action. So the first thing is I'd like to challenge you to find some new creative skill to do, to learn about, kind of jump into and go down that rabbit hole. I'd like to challenge you to make time every day for learning this new skill, even if it's 15 minutes, even if it's a half an hour. I'd like to challenge you to use your skills and talents to reach out to those in your community as you define it, right? There are no rules to what your community is. And I'd like to say thank you, to show gratitude for the talents that you have, and to look for asset-based opportunities to do so. And the last thing I'd like to challenge you to do is to be creatively selfless with others and teach them what you have learned. Thank you so much for your time today and listening, and good luck with your creative and thank you filled adventures.
I just wanted to thank you. This was very inspirational. Thank you for sharing everything. Because why? Because we've all been through things, and sometimes we are of the mindset that, why does all this happen to me and only me? It doesn't, unfortunately, right?
And does anyone have any questions or anything?
Any questions?
No.
Let's see. Melissa, I love the idea about the twig and the ink.
Oh, thanks.
That would be, how long does it have to dry for? Because that would be a really interesting project.
Yeah, India ink dries fairly quick, unless it's
But
really.
for the stick itself.
Oh, you know, you could actually take it off the tree and sharpen it that day. But I like to let them dry a little bit.
To let them dry.
Yeah, I mean, you can let them dry overnight or a couple days, and then sharpen them up, and they're good to go.
I love that you say enjoy the process.
Yeah.
That's something I see, and I tell my students all the time. You know, when we're drawing, or when you ask them to do something creative, it's like, well, you know, I'm not an artist, I can't do it. It's like, well, don't have that idea in your head that you're not an artist or that you can't. And don't ever have the idea of what your finished product will look like, because it never will. It just won't. It doesn't for the best of us, right? Just enjoy the process. If you make a mistake, you work with that mistake.
Right.
And when, especially like in scientific illustration or in technical drawing, when they're drawing and they tell me, no, professor, I just don't like it. It's not working. It's not looking good. It's like, you know what? Just put it aside and do something else. And they look at me like, we just used all your art materials. It's like, just put it aside and do something else. Yeah. So when they finish that something else, I always have them go back to the piece they didn't like. And you tell them, well, that in your mind is garbage. So you can't possibly mess it up any more than what you think it is.
Right.
That almost always is their best piece, because in their mind, they don't care what it's going to end up looking like.
Yeah, and in that sense, they've given themselves permission, right?
Permission.
Given themselves permission to fail and let it just be awful, and to know, okay, well, if this doesn't turn out, it's okay if I throw it away. And that's kind of those, when we give ourselves permission, those are some of the benefits, is we kind of take this burden off of our shoulders of perfection, right? We don't have to perform as a professional artist. We can just kind of relax and have fun. And that's one thing I love about giving ourselves permission, is that it removes all of that pressure. It can just fall right off of our back. And that's really kind of interesting to see. And, you know, one thing too that I suggest when people get frustrated is to go for a walk, to like physically change the space you're in and to go for a walk. And if you're, you know, working in a professional studio or even a classroom studio, you often have that capability, right? Where you could just get up and go for a walk outside and feel the fresh air on your face, or get a snack and walk around and then come back to it. And, you know, like you said too, I've often have students just put it aside for a few days, right, and get back to it. And I've done that myself. I will work on multiple canvases at a time, or multiple drawings or multiple watercolors at a time, just for that reason, so that I can take this thing I'm working on, not get too deep in it or even get frustrated, but do a little bit that I know I need to do and put it aside and go to the next piece, and it's fresh. And then I'll work on that. And then I'll like, okay, I'm good there. I'll go to the next piece. And that's something that really works because it lets us just kind of let go of the burdens of perfection, and it lets us enjoy the processes, which are really important.
Right.
Thank you, Ms. Leaym-Fernandez and Leo, for this excellent presentation. I have a couple of points that I would like to touch upon.
Sure.
One of them is, why do we have to give ourselves permission? Like,
Mhm.
what, like, where does that come from? And also, I mean, it's just like rhetorical questions. You take whichever ones they might be, because they might be, but just about like thinking out loud, right? What might make some people think they can and others that they cannot? That they need to ask permission or even give themselves that permission, right? And
Mhm.
another huge one that came to mind is the courage and the decision to step up. And like you said, I'm going to go to this school that doesn't look like the top of my list, but it's like feeling that is where I'm needed, and perhaps putting your career aside or your studies aside for the greater good, right? There's so many questions that you're raising here in regards to approaching one's life path, right? And not solely thinking about one's own career or education or just one, like me, myself, and I, but rather the broader spectrum. So if you like to touch upon any of those, expand a bit from your experience and all your research, I will be delighted to hear a bit more.
Yeah, thank you, Carolina, for that. One thing that strikes me is um, with permission, why giving ourselves permission is I have run into many people, adults and children and everybody in between, with I can't is the first thing out of their mouth. I can't. And it's like, well, if you can write your name and you can make your bed and you can get dressed, then you can, right? I mean, you have all the skills you need to do artistic things. For some reason, you just don't believe that you can, but you can. And so for me, I found that if people gave themselves permission to fail and to try again without any added burdens of perfection and these expectations of creative perfection, then they relaxed. They were able to just relax and enjoy those processes, as you mentioned, right? That's really important. And so that's one thing I found that was just really important about giving permission. And I have to share a story about the courage to step up. Your last comment, your question was, I have a friend, and years ago, she was really angry at me and she was really frustrated. And I couldn't figure out why she was frustrated. I'm like thinking, did I do something? Going through the list, did I say something? And finally, it came down to the fact that my husband and I, who are both teachers, have our summers off together. And we have most of our major holidays together as we teach. And she was really angry because she didn't have that. Yet her husband has a high 6-figure income. She could go to Europe for 2 months with 5 boys and everything's paid for in cash, right? We don't have those kinds of things, luxuries in our life, but we have a quality of living that we really enjoy. And we like each other, so we like being with each other. And I found that, I may not ever be like world renowned for my artwork. That may not be my life, even though I'd love it if my artwork was super famous, right? Who wouldn't? And I may not be like the richest person in the world. And that's fine, because I have a great family. I have a great relationship with those people in my family. And I have great relationships with my students. And to me, that is way more important than all the other extraneous stuff that happens in this life. And it's a choice. And it's a choice that I've made. And that's why I came back to get my PhD, because I want to do more. And yes, I'd like to make good money and get out of debt and do all those things that, people want to do, and travel. I love to travel. But I think there's something powerful in being a good human being. And I think each of us have to define that. And sometimes in our life, we have to decide, is it, good, better, or best? And what kind of life are we going to lead? And how are we going to use our talents? And are we going to just be so focused on getting more likes or getting more attention, or, those kinds of things that are really self-filled, right? Selfish versus being selfless. And selfless is hard because you have to put yourself out there and you have to be raw sometimes. And it's scary. But in the long run, it really eliminates the boundaries that have been falsely created between us as human beings and those differences. And it lets us see that we are very much alike in a lot of ways. And we have a lot of similar stories in a lot of ways. So I hope that answers your question.
Amen. That's right. I would like to take another second and shout out to Leo. Come on, everybody. Let's say thank you to our student ambassador today.
Yes, thank you,
Yeah.
Leo.
And our
Thank
MC,
you, Leo.
Professor RG. How about Professor RG for the MC?
Yeah.
There we go. There we go. Just as a reminder, as Professor RG is also putting on the chat there, we're having those events coming up, but also on Saturday, the award of the Spring 2021 Artivist Award. Cynthia Tovar will be presenting the project that she worked on with the grant that she received, that is Donde Puedo Ir, Searching for Home. So we hope that you also stay tuned for that. That's on February 19th. And all of this you can find on the landing page. And it was so interesting that today you talked about also sustainable fashion and,
Yes.
kind of like longevity of fashion nowadays. And our next talk on Monday is going to be precisely that topic. And the speaker is a specialist in textiles. And she's trying to utilize more sustainable materials and techniques, including more modern, like let's say like laser cutter and all those kind of techniques now that are available for her fashion design. So just keep going and researching on there, and you'll see all the wonderful topics coming up as it was today.
I'll have to listen to that because that sounds like it could be potentially just really, really interesting.
Okay. Melissa, you should take a moment and look at all that's in the chat. You have many thank yous and for sharing all these personal and professional. That's a word. Carolina and I go back and forth with a lot is what's professional? Who can say really what professional is, right? We're all professional in our own way. Yeah, and sometimes it's just nice not to be the very famous ones, but the ones that make a difference in many lives.
Yeah.
So we don't have the fame and we don't have the fortune, but we have a different kind of fortune, that spiritual one. What you get when somebody tells you thank you, or reaches out years later and said, you inspired me. That's what matters.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here. Hope to see you again very soon. Leo, we will be looking at your Instagram and some of your work. Melissa, we hope to see you here again. Thank you again for all of your inspiring words. Continue working. Best of luck with your dissertation and hope to see you back. Maybe you can present something when you finish your dissertation, present that.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah.
And before we go, definitely, would you mind sharing? I know you share a couple of action steps at the end of the presentation, but one key takeaway for our audience today to take action.
I think as you learn that new skill, that new creative practice, or you find that old one, share it with somebody. Share it with somebody as an act of gratitude, and don't keep that to yourself. So if you need to say thank you to somebody, make something creative to give to somebody to say thank you.
Like that.
Beautiful.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Bye. Thanks for coming.
Bye-bye. Bye.